Excellent choice. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a while since I've done a deck profile. I think it's been since the release of Vanguard EX, actually. So today we're going to be taking a look at God Hand, one of the contenders for Worlds. So this is one of the other good aggro, kind of like try to end games on turn 3, turn 4 decks that, especially going first, and draws into his pieces, does that very well. So we're going to go through the deck. I'm not going to take too long with it. I just want to cover it and talk about it. And, I don't think there's too much of a point to talk about matchups too much, but more of what people tend to do to counter this deck and what its glaring weaknesses are, but also its strengths. So, beginning, we are playing Battle Riser as a starter. Battle Riser, of course, is just your regular starter, but the reason for playing him is basically that you can either play White Tiger if you're running the Beast Deity variant, or you can play the new guy if you want to. But when you play Battle Riser, the main strength of playing this guy is that either your opponent thinks you're playing High-Powered Riser Custom, or you are playing High-Powered Riser Custom, which, spoiler alert, this deck does run that card pretty well, and it's pretty nice to see an older V-Series card come back like this. But it's good because it'll at least make your opponent think that you have a card choice, which you might not even have. So it's really good for that reason, in my opinion, so definitely worth to keep that in mind. But obviously, if you do run Crimson Scarlet Bird, then you do want to run the White Tiger. But Battle Riser is perfectly fine on its own as a starter, so it's good for that little bait in a sense. And of course, I will mention that this is not the Beast Deity variant. Ryan Kai topped with a really nice Beast Deity variant, and if you guys really want to, I can feature it, but I think by the time I'm back from Japan, from Worlds, that might be a bit late. So if you want it to be featured, then it's going to be after Worlds. But now, moving on to our Grade 3s, we have only one Grade 3, which is God Hand. And so, it's immediately as I say this, I will say that this deck is based on a Nova list that has topped in Japan a couple times, and it's a little bit different from one of them, but like I think that it's a pretty strong contender with just 4 Grade 3s, because that way when you G-assist you will be like certain to go into God Hand no matter what. And the other Grade 3s, like outside of Azure Dragon, which you can play in the Beast Deity variant, I don't think it's worth it. So let's go over God Hand's effect. So God Hand has 2 skills, the first one of which is a continuous Vanguard Circle. The power increase of front trigger effects revealed for your drive check get plus 10k power. So every time you flip a front, it will give your front row plus 20k instead of plus 10k as it normally would. And then furthermore, when he attacks on Vanguard Circle, you make it almost 1 and discard a card, and until the end of that battle he gets Drive plus 1, and if your opponent's Vanguard is Grade 3 or greater, he also gets a crit. So by getting Drive plus 1, you essentially get another chance at checking your fronts. That's the main purpose of it, and obviously the extra crit pressure does help in securing games earlier. And obviously going first you will not have that, but you can still count almost 1, discard 1 for the extra drive. The thing that you'll notice with this deck is that just like this discard 1 for plus 1 drive, a lot of effects in this deck are very much like, oh, did you plus? Well, you have to discard 1. So you don't really almost ever plus in the deck outside of like just kind of filtering. So that's something to keep in mind. They really control your hand, but because of that, there is a card that we can play that helps us, still be able to plus under those conditions. So God Hand Dragon is our only Grade 3, but in my opinion, still a very, very good one, and it's worth to run it as just 4 Grade 3s because like you're running 6 maximum if you run Azure Dragon, and if you don't want to play the Beast Deities, then I think this lineup is perfectly fine. Then we do have the Searcher, because like if you're playing a 4 Grade 3 deck, it's always optimal to play it with a Searcher, which is Fusing Striker, which we play 4 copies of. Fusing Striker does have 2 effects as well. First one is Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. The power increase of your front triggers is plus 5k power. So when you just have him on the board, it will be a 15k front, but with God Hand and this powered up, it will be 25. If you have 2 Fusing Strikers, it will be 30k per front trigger. So as you can see, the power really does build up a lot on these skills, and so that's the really strong part of this deck, honestly. And then his other skill, as I said, he's a Searcher. When placed on Vanguard or Rearguard, you can look at the top 5 cards for God Hand and then reveal it, put it into your hand, and then if you put a card into your hand, you have to discard 1. So just like God Hand, if you plus, you have to discard. So a bit unfortunate that you can't just add it, but I guess they would have added a cost otherwise, because it is free. You don't have to Soul Blast or Counter Blast or anything. I guess I wouldn't have minded paying a Soul Blast for this effect, because not that much in this deck does actually Soul Blast, so it wouldn't have been too bad. I know some builds do Soul Blast a bit more, but alas. Anyway, but it is a nice effect because you can just search out the God Hand. You can use 2 of these in one turn if you really are missing from the first search. Obviously it can still happen that you don't hit him at all, and then you still have to G-assist next turn, but alas, at least the deck gives you some chances to kind of like pseudo G-assist with the Fusing Striker, so that's definitely quite nice. Then, the other new grade 2 that we are running 4 times of is the Odd Puncher Cell 9. So Odd Puncher's effect is quite simple. Vanguard and Rearguard Circle also has 8k power. Once per turn, when you check a front trigger, you may have this unit gain an extra crit. So pretty nice effect because you're able to essentially put on a lot of pressure from very early. Especially, let's say if you do go second, you're essentially having a crit on Vanguard and also on as many Cell 9s as you have on board. Therefore, having a bunch of attacks that swing for 2 crit is definitely very threatening. And sure, it is 8k power, but it's still a very good one. Like, the only downside is that obviously you might write it. Some people like to not run this card at 4 copies as a reason, but I think it's still quite strong regardless, and it's worth to run it just for the trade-off, because I think in this like super aggressive build of it, I think you definitely want to maximize on cards like this that just help you be as aggressive as possible from as early as possible. So definitely a very cool card. Then we do have some returning faces as well. So we have Kick Typhoon. For those of you that don't know his effects, we can still go over them. So Kick has 2 effects. When placed on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle skill, if he's on a Vanguard Circle or an additional Rearguard Circle, then one of your units gets plus 5k. It can be himself as well. So only on Axle and Vanguard Circles. And then his other skill is when he attacks once per turn, if all of the front row Rearguard Circles are occupied on your field, then you may count +1 and stand one of your other Rearguards. So literally just a restander, but a very good one at that, because he essentially gets you that extra little power that can help. For example, putting that on a Cell 9 makes it 13k if it's not on an Axle 2, and therefore it's able to essentially restand with a bunch of extra power on it. And then being able to restand those huge attackers, or being able to restand cards like Cell 9, is obviously very, very pressure inducing, I guess, or it's just a lot of pressure for your opponent to deal with, basically is what I'm trying to say. And so it's because of cards like this that I wouldn't be surprised if the deck actually came out to do pretty well at Worlds, because you can really high roll with the deck, and cards like Kick make it even better. So then, as we previously mentioned, I am running 2 of high-powered Riser Custom. So this is the trend that you'll notice in Japan. A lot of people are playing it like this. For those of you that don't know his effect, he has 2 skills. First, when placed on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, you may call a Battle Riser from your soul to a Rearguard Circle in the same column as him. So if you ride him, he'll just be the boosting a unit for a while. And then when High Power Riser Custom's attack hits a Vanguard, you may count +1 and put that Battle Riser back into your soul and stand one of your other Rearguards. So this kind of works out to be like a pseudo kick in a way, except that you don't need to have all Rearguard Circles occupied, but instead you do need to have a Battle Riser on the board. So be careful against certain clans that might burn that Battle Riser early, but otherwise you should be fine because those clans aren't too prominent in Standard right now. But Hyuga obviously could get rid of it, and that is a potential danger, so just beware. Hyuga, I think we need to mention, is one of the worst weaknesses of this deck, but it's kind of twofold, because if you go first, you can actually potentially end the game before they get to the Hyuga board wipe, unless they get really lucky and soul charge a grade 3 off of their Jakotsu girl. So like, if you go first, you actually have a pretty fair chance against Hyuga, as long as you can end on turn 4. If he takes any longer than turn 4, you probably can't survive. So that's an important thing to note here, because yeah, that's a problem. That's an elephant in the room that needs to be addressed. Then moving on, we have 4 of the Starfighter Silver Fist. So the effects that this guy has, you have noticed from other cards already. So first things first, the power increase of your fronts is 5k higher. So again, just like I said with the grade 2 Searcher, it's going to be like 15k with a normal front or 25k with God Hand, and obviously it stacks. Then his other skill, which I'm really disappointed in, is the Vanguard Circle. When its attack hits a Vanguard, you draw a card and discard a card. Now, Narukami has the exact same effect on a rare, obviously without this extra power from fronts, but did it really have to discard? Could we not have just a little bit of free advantage on turn 1? I feel like that's a bit of a shame, and they really could have allowed us, because like going second is like, do we really need to just filter? Can we not just have advantage? I mean, I guess it's fine. I mean, that's how the card was printed in the end, but slightly wish it was a bit more, I guess, but maybe it's okay. Maybe that's what keeps this deck, you know, sort of restricted, in that it's not too strong to completely dominate the meta, I guess. But next, we have the card that makes it all work, which is Grit Bengal. So this guy has a very simple and very effective skill. When placed, you may reveal a front trigger from your hand and put it on top of your deck. Very simple and very strong. So you can stack fronts legally. This is, however, keep in mind, a -1 from hand. So this is a -1 in shield value because, I mean, you're losing out on a drive check in a way because you'll just be drive checking the thing that you had in hand already. Obviously, you can use multiple of him if you really want to overpower your opponent and like do like double front plus 50k kind of turns. So Grit Bengal is very good. He is a card that you want to see early because he will be necessary for your turn 3 setup if you want to actually do it right. And so that's going to be pretty important. Otherwise, you're going to be fishing for extra fronts from your drive checks. And I mean, God Hand does help you do that because he gives you the 3rd drive check. But we do have one more card that does help us fish through drive checks and get to those fronts, which is the one and only clefts. So clefts is a really cool card. I like him a lot. When your drive check reveals a normal unit, if your Vanguard is God Hand Dragon, you may counterblast 1 and retire him, and your Vanguard gets drive +1 until end of that battle. I like this guy quite a lot. Obviously, he is very counterblast heavy and makes the deck in general. I mean, the deck is in general very counterblast heavy. But the nice thing with this card is that if you do whiff and you keep whiffing on your 3rd check, etc., you can just keep retiring copies of him if you have multiple and if you have multiple counterblast ready to afford for that. Because it just helps you dig. And what I also like is that in premium, you can actually run God Hand and this guy to like push even more drive checks on your Bustard if you want to. Like, I know that that's a deck idea. So it's pretty interesting, but I like this card. Just, I know some people play like 2 copies of him or like 3, but I think in 4 it's fine because you do want to see him in quite a few games, especially if you get like there's quite a few decks in this meta right now that rush you down really fast, and with Revere coming in, that's literally just going to have an addition in what can rush you down. So I feel like you will have the counterblast to afford to fight back, and this is definitely a very effective card in helping you to fight back. So I think for that reason, it's quite okay to play 4 copies. And then finally, I'm running 3 copies of Claydol Mechanic. So this is what helps us with all this counterblasting in this deck because he does countercharge. So his second effect, as you can see, when you would pay counterblast, you may retire him instead and countercharge 1, so he immediately refunds whatever counterblast you paid. But then his first skill is one I want to bring attention to for the first time as well. When placed, if you have a total of 4 less cards in your hand in Regards, you draw a card. Now this can actually come up fairly often because, as I said, a lot of these effects, they do like draw and discard for a lot of them, whether it's a searcher or the drive check, etc. So you're not actually gaining hand that much, and you're usually struggling with your cards in hand. And then especially if you don't actually clean up the game on turn 3, let's say going second against Hyuga, and they board wipe you, you're probably going to have literally just 4 cards in hand with no board, and then you can actually call down Claydol Mechanic, draw yourself some extra cards, rebuild your board a little bit, and then try to fight back still. So I feel like this is actually a pretty good card because it helps you do that. It helps you fight back a little bit. It helps you just survive in some of these really, really threatening matchups. I mean, also Narukami, again, not a good matchup for this deck. You really need to play quite conservatively in early game and just wait until you get to God Hand and then just go all out and hope to win before. I mean, honestly, Narukami is just a really, really bad matchup for this deck. Like, you have no kind of like protection. Literally, your whole board can get wiped out by Golem Buster, and then it's really hard to make it back. And that's why you need cards like Claydol Mechanic to help you out. So, interesting thing to note is that, yeah, some of the popular decks in this meta really don't, like, you don't fare well against them, but at least, you know, with Hyuga, there's a good, like, portion of hope if you go first. And then I think you can already predict it from, you know, what this deck is, but also from how we've been explaining it so far. I do run not 4, not 8, not 10, but 12 front triggers. So I choose to go with 12 fronts because I feel like this deck is all about just being all or nothing. It's all about just going in, getting those fronts, like finishing the game as fast as possible. You want to have those like 3-turn, 4-turn rounds tops. So really, it's all about going in and just ending the game. So 12 front I feel like is correct. And then to finish off, I do run 4 drop EGs only. So that is the thing that I don't run any heals. And yes, I have hoped for a 6 damage heal and then realized I don't play heals. But I think it's fine like this because, like, you're not aiming to survive for too long with this deck anyway. You're trying to end as fast as possible, so you want the PGs just to block those like really big, annoying, like big crit attacks that certain clans can throw at you. Whereas with heals, like, you can still defend against certain attacks with just, you know, the front plus something, but even then you don't want to drop so many fronts, so a lot of times you will just take the attacks and pray for defensives, because, I mean, that's unfortunately kind of how the deck is. I know some people would argue, and I think the Beast Deity variant is not as YOLO as this one, but with high YOLO, with high risk comes high reward, and I think you can really get a lot of enjoyment out of this deck, and I feel like on days that your luck is good, you'll definitely just gonna steamroll through a lot of rounds. So yeah, that's the trigger lineup and the entire deck. So that's gonna be it for this video. So thank you so much for watching. As you may have noticed, I do have a new camera, so quality is very high, or rather it became high again because I have been using my iPhone for recordings for quite a while, and while the iPhone camera is quite good, it doesn't quite replace a proper camera, so it's nice to be back in this kind of beautiful setting with a proper camera and all that stuff. But also I've been editing a bit more because I did get Final Cut, so you'll notice some changes here and there. I'm also trying to just like make my videos better through better editing and better recording, and also just better shots, not just like this. Obviously, you can't do too many fancy shots in a deck profile, I think. Like, maybe you could, but I'm under a little bit of a time constraint right here, so not able to push out as much quality until I'm back from Japan for now. But that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think of the deck list, and if you guys are building this deck yourself, or if you are rooting for it in Worlds, etc. So that's gonna be it for me today, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.